Back from the hidey hole.
Yeah.
Yep.
What is this thing we're doing again?
I don't know. Well, I think it's called therapy.
Brad, I feel like I haven't seen you in several days.
Oh, yeah, because you haven't. It's been wonderful. It's went to a deserted beach, and it was empty, and that was kind of the optimal scenario. So,
Right. Nice.
yeah, a lot of driving.
That COVID washing up on the beach from China. Oh wait, that's not where it comes from.
Well, first, wrong beach.
Yeah, exactly.
This would have been Washington from.
The oceans are all connected. I mean,
Yeah, I mean the trash floats from one area to the other. Yeah, so we're back. So Paul, big news, big news. I didn't even order a phone. I kind of actually forgot. I woke up this morning and I saw.
actually forgot. You know,
Yeah.
This is not the type of attitude that Apple expects from its valued customers.
It's I woke up. It was actually today.
Jeez.
Like some of the videos, like the early unboxings or whatever, hit the thing. It was like, oh yeah, like that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I didn't order one.
I did order one.
Of course you did. Which one'd you get?
Just a 12 black. Actually, I just saw the photos. You know, it's like a little glossier than I would like. But I mean, of course, I'm going to put a case on it. Maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I found that with the lower end phones, although actually this has the same screen as the higher end phones, that the black color hides the bezels a little better. But whatever. Yeah. So actually, you know how these things go, because you can't just buy an iPhone. You got to buy a case because you want to protect your little investment. And I also bought one of those USB chargers because Apple's trying to save the environment by shipping them in 2 different containers rather than including one in the box.
There was a headline that was great, and I think it was one of the Android web. I can't even remember which side it was. Said that if Apple actually cared about the environment, they would have switched to USB-C.
Yeah. No, I think even the biggest Apple fan on earth would agree that this was just a bald-faced marketing baloney, you know, that emitted from them. Like, it's like, well, you know, there's so many chargers out in the world. You know, we don't need these things anymore. It's like, yeah, there are, but they're lightning connected chargers. Like, you put a USB-C cable in there, you know, lightning to USB-C. So that cable doesn't work with the charger that all of your fans already have. Like, that's Apple. You know, it's just so beautiful.
Yep, and people just eat it up.
So
Just like-
this is how I've experienced this a lot of times. My phone won't arrive until Friday, but my accessories are arriving today, so I get to play with those.
No, yay!
So it's like, oh god. Anyway,
So I meant to mention this before we whatever. So there's a show on Disney Plus, which you might like, because my wife and I just started watching it. It's called The Right Stuff. It's about the Gemini. I don't know how far along it goes. It starts with the Gemini program of NASA and all that. So it's like the right mix of. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, it feels kind of like that. But
what's that movie?
That was the movie about the women who were behind the Saturn V launches and going to the moon, and all the.
Well, you've seen like To the Moon, for example, which is an older HBO series, and then I mean, my God, recently there's been a bunch of them. The Apple TV fictitious account of the U.S. response to Russia landing on the moon first and sending women into space is good. It's a good series.
So it's this new. It's like it's sort of a documentary, but it's sort of like a drama. Like it hits the right mix of like shows my wife likes and shows that I like. And so we watched the first episode last night, and there was a particular scene that my wife cracked a joke, and I'm going to retell it now. I can't really spoil any of it, but there's a scene.
Of course, it's a real account.
Yeah, there's a scene where John Glenn and Alan Shepard are at a bar, and there's a whole bunch of other people there. It's like a gathering.
Sounds like a setup to a joke, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a
John
gathering
Glenn and
for
Alan Shepard.
people who are potentially in the Gemini program, and John Glenn is drinking like a seltzer water, and Alan Shepard is just getting hammered, and John Glenn just says, "All right, I'm going to go to bed early and have a good morning." And my wife goes, "That's you." And Alan Shepard is Paul, and he's just sitting there slamming whiskeys.
Yep. Unfortunately for me, John Glenn is way more famous than Alan Shepard. You know, interesting.
And the next morning, they show like John Glenn's like all chipper, and Alan Shepard like cut his hand because he fell on the glass table in his house. She's like, "Yep, that's."
Well, you'll be happy to hear that my stupid drinking decisions have continued to as recently as this past weekend when my brother-in-law remarked to me on Sunday morning that I might be a bad influence on his life, to which I replied, "You're the one that supplied the alcohol."
Wow.
Yeah. Also, just on a semi-related note, there is a Space Shuttle Challenger documentary I think it's a 4-part, maybe a 3-part.
Oh yeah, on Netflix.
On Netflix. It's excellent. And I lived through that. Obviously, I think we all kind of did or whatever. But it is weird to me. You could show me a photo of, there were not hundred. There were dozens and dozens of, actually maybe over 100 shuttle flights over the 30-year span that thing flew. I wouldn't recognize almost any of those people. I recognized every single person on that flight because it was so seared,
Yeah.
I wasn't alive when John F. Kennedy got shot, but I have a very distinct and full memory of when Ronald Reagan got shot. I was walking home from school. Somebody told me I thought he was dead. It was horrible. Mm-hmm. And then this thing. I mean, and this was until 9/11, I think, maybe the start of the Gulf War. Like one of those. It just, it just sears itself, into your memory. Crazy. That's awful. A totally avoidable tragedy. Anyway, it's worth watching.
Yeah,
It's really well done. And I didn't exactly learn the lesson because honestly, they had a second disaster several years later, I think they're in the stratosphere somewhere.
Yeah, well, that was
the same type of problem. Yeah. Like there were people who were like, "This is going to be a disaster if we don't fix this," and they went ahead with it. Yeah, the tile issue.
Anyways, other people who are
today in space, first ring space daily.
Other things happening. Google is expected to be on the wrong end of an antitrust suit filed possibly as early today, according to the Wall Street Journal, and actually, I think Reuters or one of those other are collaborating.
New York Times is on it, and it's happening today.
Yeah. So be on the lookout for that. Again, this is probably step 1 of 382 before anything actually happens, but it's going to kick off a little frenzy here.
Oh, they're going after the big one, which is Starline Search. It makes sense. There are the charges that Google's going to face from the federal government and from a variety of and by a variety, I mean, how many states are there in this country, Brad? Because every single one of them is also involved in a separate investigation of Google for the same thing.
One of the interesting things that is pointed out here as an anti-competitive practice, which you'll see where I'm going with this in a second, is that they list Google paying, for example, Apple to be the default search engine in Safari, which, I'm not disagreeing with that. But one of the outcomes of this is, like, let's say they find that they are guilty and you can't do that. Goodbye, Firefox.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, I feel bad about Firefox because they've been on the downward swing for a long time. And
they make a good product, though. That's what stinks.
They do and they don't. So 2 things to that. I mean, for one thing, when Microsoft decided to go with Chromium, the big argument there, which I completely agree with, is there need to be standards on the web for this platform to make sense. And if we're all making competing rendering engines, then web developers have to target at least 3 major rendering engines every time they make a web page. And this is too difficult. And so when they went with the back end stuff and decided to compete on features, clearly it was the right choice. And at that time I said, actually Safari too. Safari's kind of on their own thing too. But I mean, I guess there are 4. They're going to be left out in the cold, and they should have adopted Chromium as well. And there's a cultural issue there where they can't get over that. But the other thing is, from sort of a functional perspective, I'm always reminded of this because I always install, Opera, Firefox, whoever will announce the version of browser, I'll install it and look at this thing, and they don't support PWAs as standalone apps. Like they're the only, on Windows, the only major browser that doesn't do that. It's crazy. So if they just did that, and by the way, they did a million years ago. I think it was called Prism or something. Yeah, Prism. I think Mozilla back in the day. I would look at it. I would really consider. I'd seriously consider it. But they don't. I'm like, I can't. I'm not doing that.
Well, we will see. I don't disagree with what you're saying about the rendering engine because they are going to be the oddball out.
Yeah, they already are. They already are. They're under 10% and falling.
I will be curious to see if Microsoft actually does come up in this antitrust case for exactly what you just mentioned, that they said, hey, we can't even compete with Google and we're $1 trillion company and we had to switch our rendering engine.
Does that factor in? Yeah, maybe. I mean,
it could just be more of their dominance
Sure.
of the web, as a data point.
well, right. So the one thing I think about writing this, I think I sometimes think about it in terms of like books. Like one thing I think would be an interesting kind of book, and I'm sure there are many more qualified people than me writing these, is just what we would think of as like modern big tech antitrust.
Mm-hmm.
The one general statement that one can make about all of these companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, and by the way, maybe to a slightly lesser degree, Microsoft even, the term is gatekeeper. They are gatekeepers to major markets. They control the flow of customers in and out of a market.
Mm-hmm.
And Google is like the gatekeeper to the general internet.
Yeah.
It's
a big role.
Stuff. There are two things people search for online. If you want to just break it down to really general things, they're shopping for something, or they're searching for everything else. And Google is everything else, and a lot of shopping. But Amazon is a lot, is most shopping, right? I mean, these two companies they have dangerous control over what should be kind of a free and open internet.
Yeah, and then there's some pretty big hypocrisy too of what Google does from a publisher perspective. For example, if on Petri or on Thurrott we put an interstitial ad, which is like you click on a link and then an ad pops up before you can see the content. People hate them. I get it. I'm not arguing in favor of interstitials, but Google will penalize you for that and push you further down in the search rankings, which effectively hurts your business. On the other side of that, Google has no problem of slamming ads in between its YouTube videos or even during the content on the video, which is the exact same thing. You're watching a clip and it's like, look, here's an ad I can't control. And that doesn't impact their search rankings.
Institutional hypocrisy is what we call like an abuse of business practices, or abusive business practices. Google is in a unique position because when you search for things, they get to know what you're searching for and they know what's popular, and they can create services to match those things, and then they can shut down the people or the companies already competing in that area. Amazon does that with people searching for products on their site. They create Amazon Basics products using like Chinese companies that can create these things that cost nothing, put other companies out of business. Apple does it all over the place. We already know that. It's very well established, called Sherlocking. And Facebook does it. And Facebook does it in a really interesting way. They just buy the companies.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, people are chatting on this other thing? Buy WeChat. Oh, people are sharing photographs? Buy Instagram.
Here's a like the humorous thought. So Microsoft, was it like last week or the week before, went through this like not major, but they kind of refreshed the Bing, like Microsoft Bing. They went through like several different logos. I imagine that there's somebody back in marketing like, oh man, Google's going to get killed. We got to get our best face on and put on our suits so that when we're in front of everyone, we look good. And so that's why
everyone else in the team is like, we're just marking time here, Bob. We're just getting a check. Okay. 9 to 5.
But Google's going to be hurt. We got to make ourselves look pretty so that when our time to shine is here.
I don't think that's not.
Yeah.
How do you fix Google? Like, what's the fix?
Yeah. I don't know. It might just be ripping the browser away from them, but I don't know if that's going to.
I don't think I bet we don't see anything that aggressive. People like, take away the advertising engine or whatever.
You can't do that. That's not.
No, I think what you do is you do what you do to Microsoft. It's what we call a behavioral remedy. And you have what they call this person, someone. It was like an antitrust, not a mediator, but someone who. Yeah, well, it's like someone from outside the company that is essentially inside the company, which these days is a little awkward, and make sure that they adhere to the rules of the consent decree. I guess it was because it was an agreement, but that they were forced to make. In other words, like Google will not be allowed to pay to have their search engine. They will not be allowed to look at what what people are searching for and then push their own services on top of the services of third parties, et cetera, et cetera. So I that's probably where it's going to go. Like they're not going to, I don't think anyone's taking away, AdSense from Google, Instagram from Facebook, whatever. I just don't see that stuff happening.
Well, we won't be seeing anything happening for a while other than the.
Yeah, right. It will take a while. Move slow.
Because there'll be a court case, and then somebody will appeal, and then there'll be another court case, and somebody will appeal, and then.
Well, Google could learn the lesson of the Microsoft years. Although maybe the ultimate, no, actually, I was going to say the ultimate lesson is if you just let it slide, it won't matter anymore. But actually, what doesn't matter anymore is Microsoft. So maybe that is. Intel was faced with very similar antitrust charges as was Microsoft in Europe in the wake of Microsoft. And what they decided to do was just settle, to say, you know what? Yep. Okay, fine. We're going to pay the fine. We're going to make the changes that you think we should make, and we're just going to call it a day. And, you could make a decision for each of these companies, but Google, since that's what's happening right now. I mean, I look at the charges and, I'll look at the official thing when it comes out, but I've been looking at the reports and writing something up in advance. It wouldn't be hard for Google just to adhere to we'll call it a consent decree, and they don't have to give anything up. And that's actually better for Google because they've already established a dominance. It's already there. We all use Google. I almost said trust Google, but I mean, I bet some people must trust Google. But, when you hop in the car, well, actually, what did you do? You hopped in a car. Do you use Google Maps or do you use Bob's Maps? How did you get to Alabama?
Yeah, it was Google Maps the whole way.
Right. So we trust Google for that purpose. Of course we do. So it'd be a lot easier to trust Google if we knew that it was not doing what it's doing right now. Right. Imagine if Google had like the moral backbone of like Microsoft, how much better that company would be for its users.
Mm-hmm. The only downfall to your whole logical statement there is I can sum up in one word: lawyers. I mean, there's people looking at this saying, all right, here we got a field day coming. We got big companies.
Yeah, but Google is a weird company, and they do things in a very quirky fashion. Of course, that also was a wrench in my plan because they may look at this thing that I think is logical and say they have their own kind of weird way of looking at this. But we shall see. I'm sure I know the first statement out of their mouth is going to be, we disagree with this finding.
You might even say without merit, I think is usually we find this case to be without merit. And just like this podcast, we are out of time and merit.
Just once every 10 days now. Is that how this works? Yeah. Okay.